Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to the webinar today. It is 10:30 Pacific. Uh, I guess I could do math and figure out what it is on the East Coast, but everybody presenting here is on the West Coast. So, hey, it's 10:30. But today we're going to be talking about cyber insurance and what's coming in 2022. We're here with Amwins and G2. Many of you know G2, and some of you know us here at Critical Insight. And we're very excited to have you here today. While we have some other people coming into the room, couple things I'd like to call out. Number one is on the right-hand side of your page, there is a chat. And if it's not there, on the bottom right, there's a little button that says chat. I encourage you to open that button. And you can put questions in. We love interruptions in all of our events and panels and stuff. So please go into the chat and right now go ahead and put where you're joining from. We'd love to know where you are. And if you're not in the Pacific time zone, tell me what time it is where you are. Okay, I'm kidding. I can figure that out. But seriously, go ahead in the chat and put us and tell us where you are. I'm in Seattle, and we still have people coming to the room here. Ooh, we have one in Iowa. Hey, Andy. And Andy, you are definitely not in the Pacific time zone. So I think we're going to get started here. I'm in Seattle. Lauren, I think you're in your Bay Area, right?
Yep, San Francisco.
Yeah, and then Steve is in a nice warm place.
Yep, Carlsbad, San Diego area.
So jealous. So jealous.
We've covered the entire continent.
You mean with Iowa and the West Coast?
Well, no, I mean the West Coast. We've covered all the way from Seattle to San Diego. I guess that's not the whole continent, but
that's not. That's
the part that counts to me, I guess.
All right, cool.
Canadians are going to come after me now.
Yeah, and Mexicans, and there's going to be a lot of problems for you, Mike. So let's get off that topic, and let's go to the intro slide here. Lauren.
Hi, everyone. Lauren Erickson with G2 Insurance. We are a retail insurance brokerage firm based in San Francisco, but with clients all over the country. And I'm excited to talk to everyone about cyber and cyber insurance.
Steve?
Thanks, guys. Steve Vallone. I work with Amwins Insurance Brokerage. I'm technically based out of San Francisco, but I live in the sunny San Diego area. Started my career as an underwriter on the carrier side and wanted to move to the wholesale side to solve solutions and solve cyber problems for insureds and brokers alike. So I work with and partner with G2 Insurance Services and do all kinds of cyber placements.
Mike.
And I am Mike Hamilton. I am here mainly for comedy relief because everybody else is a lot smarter than me, especially about this topic. But I'm going to cover some headlines. My career in security goes back about 30 years. I'm the former CISO of the city of Seattle. I think more importantly, more germane to this conversation, at one point I was the managing consultant for VeriSign Global Security. And so even back then, insurance was a topic, not like it is today. But I'm happy to be here to represent the security side of the conversation.
And my name is Jake Milstein. I run marketing for Critical Insight, but marketing doesn't really have anything to do with this. One of the reasons that I'm here is so Critical Insight provides two things. We do risk assessments and other professional services like that. But on the other side, we watch networks 24/7 for signs of intrusion. This funny thing started happening about a year ago, which is as people were coming up to their renewals and seeing changes in their policies, especially our customers, they're like, whoa, like this has changed. And so I started taking those calls from our customers, from other folks. And so I've been working with insurance companies to try to figure out, okay, if folks are using us, can they get, their risk is lowered. And so I've sort of become the internal, like, let's talk to our customers about insurance. Let's figure out how we can help them in this very changing insurance environment that we're going to talk about, which is why I'm here. I also host our webinars. So Lauren's going to ask questions. I'll look at the chat. And then stay to the end. I forgot to mention this because we have a survey at the end where One, we'd love for you to take the survey because it makes all of the webinars we do with G2 better. And second is when you take the survey, you can also either get a gift card or donate it to a food bank. So stay to the end because you're good people. All right, Lauren.
Great. Thanks.
Wait. Oh, yeah. This is my slide. Sorry. See? So we did introductions. We're going to talk. Lauren's going to talk about what's happening and what's changing. We're talking about what's coming here in 2022, and then we're going to do a Q&A with where this is going. And at the end, obviously, is the survey. All right, Lauren and Mike.
Okay, so the way we like to start these things always, just to kind of loosen everybody up, is just look at some headlines, see what's going on now. So looks like Beasley is starting to make money on cyber insurance, which I think is a good sign for the industry. Because everybody's trying to move those levers and figure out, how this can be a profitable business because it needs to be there. We need to transfer risk. Part of that, I think, is due to some of the success in what the federal government has been doing, bringing to bear a lot of resources from Department of Justice, Department of Treasury through the OFAC statute, the Office of Financial Asset Control, through even the DOD, melting infrastructures of criminals. So all those are starting to have a positive effect, and they're getting the operators to back off a little bit. Although there is a lot of new warnings out now about the fact that these criminals are just going for the larger organizations for the bigger payouts because the risk for them is higher. Their cost and risk has gone up. Therefore, their targets are going to go up. Yes, everybody is being scrutinized for their practices when they're having the insurance discussion. And I think that is a very interesting kind of side effect from this. So if you take credit cards, you're regulated by PCI. Payment card industry. If you have health records, you're regulated by HIPAA. If you're a construction company, you're not regulated, but the insurance company is giving you requirements to meet. I think that is a good thing because that is a market force that is creating changes in behavior where all of the, hey, you need to do this talk never really moved that needle. So I think that's a good effect. Yes, Lloyd's of London and others are saying we don't really want to insure an act of war or an act of terrorism. And to the extent that these attacks can be attributed to nation states, they want to back off of that and say, that's not us. Somebody else is going to have to be in that game. Federal government has done this before with, for example, a program called TRIP, the Terrorism Reinsurance Program. They haven't moved to become a reinsurer for cyber insurance, but that might be on the radar. And then we're having more of these warnings about acts of war coming. Interestingly, there was a global attack called NotPetya a few years back, and Merck was one of the companies that sustained a lot of collateral damage there. Well, they wanted their insurance company to pay them for that. The insurance company said, no, that's an act of war. Merck just won the suit. So this is an interesting development. It's very recent. And then finally, I'm hearing more and more talk about the fact that in order to really understand the risk of the insured, what we need are continuous measurements, not a point in time, do you have multi-factor authentication, but monitoring that network to know what's going on. So that could be on everybody's radar as well. So there's a few headlines. Hopefully that gets us kind of up to date on what the state is of cyber insurance and some of the big developments that I think are going to have an impact on it.
Thanks, Mike. So what is happening in cyber? So when we think about it as insurance brokers, when cyber was starting to be introduced as an insurance product, it was really in the 90s. And it was because of those breaches of data going onto the dark web that led to a rise in people purchasing the policy. But nowadays it's changed. I would say we don't have to convince clients anymore to purchase cyber insurance. They, for the most part, do. It's very rare that a client doesn't have cyber anymore. And now it's really about ransomware. Ransomware is really leading everyone to buy higher limits. And if they've been lollygagging on purchasing it in the first place, they now see the need. policies are now more expensive, and social engineering and email compromise is also a trigger. So that's where we're at now. But the state of the landscape has really changed in the last 12 months. Before, and Steve can attribute this as well, is we used to just have 3 questions on an application for clients to fill out. What's your name? What's your website? What's your revenue? Or how many records do you hold? And here's your quote. There was no actual underwriting of what are your controls, and how do we know that this policy is going to be a fit for you? So now clients are seeing 2, 3, 5, 10-page applications that are asking questions that are so detailed that typically the person who completes the application, the CFO, finance director, they don't even know how to answer the questions. So what I've been seeing as a retail broker in the last 6 months is really stopping and saying, we must take a holistic look at your cyber hygiene and make sure that you can answer those questions confidently, appropriately, and that you're not fudging the answer just to get the quote, and that you actually have the protocols in place to be underwritten properly. And we have to start really far in advance. Usually when you're completing your applications for your insurance renewal, it's 60 to 90 days before. We have to start now. That's why I thought it would be appropriate for us to have this chat in February. For anyone that has a July 1 renewal date, you really should be looking at these applications right now and making sure that your IT department or whoever you use can actually answer the questions. So I thought we'd kind of get into a casual discussion with everyone on the panel. And then, of course, if you have specific questions, please drop those into the chat, because we want to make sure that we tailor this conversation to your business. So I'd like to first start with a question to Steve, which is, Steve, you see applications all the time from various retail brokers of companies and organizations of different sizes. So when you receive applications in the last 6-9 months, what do you think is the biggest thing that you've been noticing? Have you noticed any trends of people answering questions not correctly, or is it just an overall that they're not up to speed or where they should be in their cyber hygiene?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. As you alluded to before, previously we would get the cyber submission and it would be, small pieces of information, and we could send it out to 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 different carriers, and you would get 30 different variations of quotes. The amount of underwriting was also varied. It could be a portal. You could put name, address, website, revenues in and get a quote for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million limits, or you'd send a PDF application to different underwriters. Now, the application process has become so much more painstakingly detailed because the carriers are learning on the fly how to best assess what questions do we need to ask, which relates to what actually happens with the breaches. And so what I do when I look at these applications or submissions when they first come in is right away I look for the no answers, right? And so all of these applications are a self-assessment on, are you doing this? Are you doing that? And they're basically, controls. And there are some questions in there that are trapdoors that you shouldn't be saying no to. Such, do you have something enabled that would be, a vulnerability, and you should say no. So the trend that we are seeing was last year that the shock to the system was, if you don't have multi-factor or 2FA or multi-factor authentication, then that was something that had to be forced through. And there's no real, as Jake and Mike had alluded to, in the various industries you have, government authorities or controlled restrictions that you have to live by, especially in banking and healthcare, and public entities. So now the insurance industry is forcing controls, and the new mantra is, if you don't have multi-factor authentication, you almost can no longer get cyber insurance. So that's the first thing we look for is the MFA question.
And hey, I just want to, and
Yeah.
Steve, I just want to jump in there because I see in the audience here, we have some folks who might know what MFA is and some who don't. So MFA, when you log into something, is something a password, and something you have, like your phone. And so, and when the insurance companies are trying to make sure you have it turned on, they don't just mean for one or two people. They mean that you have it turned on universally and internally. So when you're logging into different pieces of software, and I'm sure we'll get to a question later about, hey, am I safe if I have everything in the cloud? Like if you log into your cloud environment, AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, that you have that 2FA as well. And one thing that I just heard this week is that one of the insurance questions was, are you using text for MFA or are you using an app for 2FA? The text is where, you get that code.
Right. SMS. Right.
Right. You get a like a 6-digit, 3-digit, 5-digit code. And they're saying that's not good enough anymore, that you need an app. Like Microsoft Authenticator or Duo or Google Authenticator as the app. Sorry, Steve, you had more to say. I just wanted to make sure people knew what 2FA and MFA were there.
Jake, do you agree with that insurance question? That you think that the Authenticator app is the gold standard now?
Mike, I'll tell you what Mike preaches. I will tell you my opinion on that is the gold standard is absolutely that it's not a text. And Mike has a great story about that. And Mike, tell that in 1 second. One thing I'll say is, look, having some 2FA, even if it's SMS, is so much better than having no 2FA. That's a great step. Should insurance companies be that particular? I don't know, Mike. You have a good SMS story, but what
is my SMS story? Sorry, help me out here.
About SIM swapping.
Oh, well, so my wife was actually SIM swapped. Okay, what a SIM swap is: SIM is the card in your phone that identifies your phone uniquely on the phone network, communicates with cell towers, things like that. And turns out you can call up the phone company, and if you can impersonate someone well enough, you can convince the phone company that I dropped my phone in Puget Sound. It's 900 feet deep. I have a new phone. Please connect my old phone number to this SIM card, to this phone I'm calling you from. And if it's one of the smaller phone companies, they'll do it. And all of a sudden that person is holding your phone. And after that, they went after her Yahoo account, and then they went after her Coinbase account. So, your phone is the key to a lot of things there. And what we're talking about, not letting your second code come over just as a text message, right? SMS, that's what that is. And instead using the Microsoft Authenticator, the Google Authenticator, much, much more secure. And you will know every time that you get a text message, it's fake. So, it's really important to, step up to the plate with multi-factor authentication, but do it right.
Wow, that is terrifying. But I guess that's a sign of the times. Steve, when you see the questions on the applications about multi-factor authentication, do you think that clients understand that it needs to be across all platforms, or are they assuming it's just on their main, email or main platform that they use?
Yeah, that's a good question, because last year it was like, do you do MFA, yes or no? And then this year it's gotten much more technical, and again, no MFA, no cyber. Now it's no MFA when you get into your network, okay, but also when you log into all your software as a service portals, such as your cloud providers, your Salesforce, your AWS, the different various systems that you use. There's a secondary layer of MFA, and then remote connection. So obviously, with the pandemic, everybody's moving to remote work. The other big vulnerability that has come across a lot of the cyber insurers is RDP, remote desktop protocol. And so if you're signing in through an RDP, then you have to have a secondary MFA as well. And the insurance carriers, again, for the bigger, the larger the risk, the more the scrutiny, right? The more questions are going to be, and there's specific industries that have specific questionnaires. the real big thing that the insurance carriers want to know about too is privileged account management. Now, privileged account management is a case-by-case basis, but what I like to liken it to is the people that hold the keys to the kingdom, right? The people that have administrator access, the people that have access to multiple systems. Those people need a secondary or a third, MFA type of access, and there needs to be some privileged account management, which is typically offered by some type of, service provider as well, that can do a password manager and that can do some additional tooling in that vault. So maybe I can pass it over to Mike and Jake to talk about, password management and tooling on privileged account management, if you want to get that technical.
Yeah, I'll just say a few words about it. So we're going through an audit right now. Like every other company, we know we have to show our security papers, right? That is just the economy we're in. Show me your papers to your insurance company, to your business partners, to your customers, everybody. And so going through that audit, yes, this whole business about privileged account management and quarterly access authorization management approvals to make, this gets into the finer grained part of complying with security requirements. This is an expectation, and it's not really on, the top 10 list of things that insurance companies are requiring. But you're making a great point, Steve, because that privileged account management and how the credentials are managed around that, if it's a whole bunch of people that all have the same admin password, you're doing it wrong. You're going to fail. There are technologies that help this. Obviously, Okta, Duo, right, multi-factor authentication companies, but they all have vaults where they can store these credentials and you can check them out temporarily. I think more than that, though, to your point about access authorization, making sure that the people who have those credentials are authorized to use them. I think the only company that really has a product for identity governance administration is SailPoint. We've done that by building a Microsoft flow so that quarterly we go through and all the managers get here's what your people can do. Is this all still good? That's a hand roll. It meets the requirement, but it's not as good, I think, as what we could get if we got a commercial product. But that is a super important point right there, because again, and there's lots of companies that do this, right? Here's the admin password. If you guys need it, there it is. That's a horrible way to do it. And that's been the source of some very bad compromises. And I'll throw one out there. Tyler Technologies is a company that has a vice grip on local governments, and specifically a lot of products, one of which is called Munis, which is an ERP system. Well, turns out bad guys compromised Tyler Technologies, surveilled them for all of the admin passwords, and then used that to go out and compromise all of these cities. So bad password management can propagate out to your customer base and cause a lot more damage than just to yourself.
Hey, I'll also mention on password management. Mike and I do free security awareness trainings every other week. And when two of the password management companies, Dashlane and 1Password, heard we were doing it, they gave us free codes. If anybody wants the code for free password management for a year from those two companies, we don't make money on that. It's just a good thing to do. Shoot me an email. I'll put my email address in the chat, and I'll kick it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jake. So let's talk about, you had mentioned, well, actually, Lorna had a really nice question about, are we seeing certifications or any reporting that insurance companies are requesting? I guess it's kind of prove it. That's right, where they answer the question on the application. Do they then say, and attach X, Y, and Z? Do you think that they'll ever get to that level, Steve, of where they want to see things? Or are any certain companies asking for proof that they are doing what they say they are?
Or done by a third party rather than a self-assessment?
Right. Mm-hmm.
It is a bit of a more faith-based system right now, and they are not auditable. Now, do I think that down the road they could be asking for certificates as well as third-party assessment, third-party verification? Absolutely. I think, if there's anything that we've learned from the insurance industry on cyber, is that they're pretty self-aware that they really don't know what they're doing, and they've had to reinvent themselves multiple times, even in the last 18 months. And I think some of those insurance carriers scoffed at the idea of, and they still do kind of scoff at the idea of customers coming to them and saying, hey, I use this service provider, and can that get me a discount in my cyber insurance? And the insurance carriers traditionally said, well, no, because we don't want to limit ourselves to specific vendors. But now they're starting to show more favorability with specific vendors that have, trusted verification, such as, Okta and SalesPass, or LastPoint and Duo that we've talked about on MFA. Now, that's for MFA. When it comes to cybersecurity consulting, that's a different story. They like to keep it open there. And then the insurance carriers now are trying to contract with outsourced companies that do constant monitoring, or they do constant monitoring themselves as part of the underwriting process. So I think the insurance carriers are starting to understand through pain the last 2 years that you can no longer really assess entirely someone's underwriting of their cyber hygiene and controls with a PDF app, right? And additional measures need to be happening with these additional scans. And there's a lot of money flowing into the cyber insurance industry about a better mousetrap and a way to scan you, to verify without answering the app. But for now, the application still serves as the best tool, and these applications are evolving very significantly and very quickly over the last couple of years. And we see some larger insurance carriers, such as AIG, one of being the largest insurance carrier, top 3 in the space for years, will not quote without their ransomware application, won't quote primary, won't quote excess, and their ransomware application being very detailed and very onerous compared with others.
This is a question for everyone. The idea of a cyber carrier that then starts to either contract out security monitoring versus a tech company like a cybersecurity company that then happens to sell insurance. Do you feel that there is one better than the other? Do you think that the ones that are doing the constant scanning have a better profit margin because they're catching things for their clients? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I'll say one thing here, which is it's an evolving space, right? An insurance carrier an insurance broker or carrier that also has cyber insurance services. One thing to watch out for there is if you have something in your environment that's not good, even whether it's a breach, whether somebody made a mistake, whether something, do you want to know first, or do you want your insurance company to know first? And in some of the cases, one of the insurance carriers has bought a company like ours. And from what somebody just told me, if they have a breach, the insurance company finds out about the breach before the company that had the breach. And, it brings down their insurance, but, is that the dynamic you want? I think is one of the questions.
Let me take a stab at that too, and I want to answer in 2 ways. First of all, the continuous monitoring as something you can hold up to say, we're doing our security controls right, is viewed favorably by insurance companies. And here's why. Because when you talk about managing risk, okay, this whole cyber nonsense is a foreseeable risk. Stuff will happen. Of that, it's highly variable. So there's 2 terms to the risk expression: the likelihood of a bad thing happening. Okay, we know that's going to happen. Something's going to happen. You cannot buy down that risk to 0. You cannot buy down the likelihood of a bad outcome to 0. After you've exhausted everything you can do with preventive controls, then you have to worry about managing the impact of these events. And so, yeah, you're going to get a little piece of software crud on computers. That is going to happen. What the impact can be: the help desk cleaned up somebody's workstation, or the impact can be the FBI just called and all our customer records are for sale. And the difference between those two things is whether or not you're monitoring your network and you see the signal that your prevention has failed and you got a little fire to put out. So I will say that, the whole bit about, continuous monitoring being, viewed favorably by insurance companies, every conversation we've had goes there. Along with that, I will say that for the most part, I don't think anybody is going to be comfortable with allowing an insurance company to have real-time access to information like that. It's an interesting idea because in some way, insurance companies have to parameterize this risk. And, to Steve's point, the whole self-assessment, which is always aspirational, doesn't really get you there. And when something happens and the insurance company sends in the smoke jumpers with Q-tips and toothpicks, they may find out that some of the claims, the assertions you made in that self-assessment were not correct. So, I don't know where it's going, this combination of cyber and insurance companies trying to act as one. And Jake points out it's still very nascent, it's very bubbly, and I don't think we've figured it out yet.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to figure it out. Right? And I think that they're trying to figure out if they do more monitoring, then if they have more control over the oversight of your IT and the monitoring of your IT and more control in the process, can they control the losses more? And I think that the answer is TBD, but the reality is that the more awareness and the more prevention in all respects, the more friction, the more countermeasures, the more awareness of an organization, right? Everything. Pull it all together, you're a better risk. Now, are you going to, people going to come after you as well, both aimlessly and targeted attacks? Yeah. And I think the constant monitoring is probably more effective for smaller to medium-sized businesses that, are already outsourcing their IT to the cloud, might already outsource to an outsourced IT firm, and larger companies might not be as willing to do that. They might want their arms wrapped around that a little bit more. They have full IT departments. They have, vendor contract management that's in charge of assessing the risk. Because I think a huge part of, our cybersecurity controls and hygiene really is vendor management. And I think that that's something that has come to fruition, in the last couple of years more than anything with all these supply chain hacks that are happening. It didn't used to be who did you use for IT and accounting and HR. It just became a matter of fact. And now it's, well, that's really a part of your vulnerability, management as well.
You bring up an interesting point about vendor management, Steve, and I want to touch on that a little bit more, which is I've seen personally in the last year a lot of email compromise claims that have come from vendor payments and invoice manipulation and things like that. So not necessarily a data breach, but still falls in the realm of a cyber claim if you have cybercrime coverage. Are you seeing that as well as a source of where clients get confused because they feel like they weren't the ones that got, it wasn't them that got hacked, it was someone else, yet it was still a claim on their record?
Constantly. And if you talk to the people in the accounting and finance departments at businesses all across all segments, they get weird emails all day, every day. And yeah, the reality is when these spoofing emails happen, sometimes they are so convincing that it would be near impossible to realize that that wasn't from, Larry, the CFO, who was on a trip to Sweden, or Tom that was vacationing in the Bahamas, and, a payment request came through on a really important vendor. And So yeah, you don't know if your customer has been hacked or you've been hacked. And a lot of times you don't know initially, and you don't know in the beginning stages either. There has to be a significant amount of forensics and data logs that go through, as well as where that email came from. Now that tends to scare a lot of people off, because you could be doing everything right. You could still get an email that is from your customer that pretends to be them, or isn't really from the customer, that pretends to be from them, that says, hey, our bank account has changed, please, wire the funds. But again, there's risk management in there, that level of friction. You need to be able to pick up the phone and call them. There needs to be a secondary form of verification that happens, similar to all the different things that we're talking about. If you add more layers of friction, more layers of controls, you can control that process. What they try to do is get in those systems of either your customer or you to prey on something that's a rush, or something that somebody wasn't available, and that is something that, if the little hairs on the back of your neck stand up, then question it, right? If somebody's asking to do something and they're being pushy about it, and they're not usually pushy, stop, pick up the phone. So I would always urge to have a secondary way of kind of insuring something, but the insurance policies can provide coverage there. We've seen an evolution of both invoice manipulation fraud, social engineering fraud, telecom fraud on mining crypto through your utility provider. So it's certainly evolving. The insurance carriers are scared. Right? It's a risk and a payment that they have a hard time underwriting, because you can do all the different cybersecurity, but you can still get tricked by a social engineering fraud. And that's why the carriers like to sublimit that, because they're scared, right? That's why they try to put 100K or a 50K or 150K sublimit on it, because if they feel they put up $1 million or $2 million, there's still situations which they can't really ask enough questions, and they could just still be making that payment on your behalf. So it is a tricky scenario there.
Yeah.
Do you think, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Because it's dependent on third parties that you don't really have, you can't put the touch on them, right? And I got to point this out. The risk of what's called BEC, business email compromise, is about to spike. And the reason is because of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Lots of construction companies are going to be contracting with lots of local governments. Both of those are known to be very poorly secured. And construction companies' email system is going to be penetrated. They're going to reroute payments, on a construction project. This stuff is going to go down. So just, when you say insurance companies are worried about this, that risk just went up.
So this is a twofer question then. A, do you think that the majority of claims that we're seeing are human error, or are they not human error? And B, what percentage of companies do you think have really strong, proper training for employees to know what to do, and what, or flip side, what percentage of organizations don't do a good job in this and need more training?
So I'll take the first question, because I actually just researched this, and it was in the healthcare space. I just came back from the American Hospital Association summit in Phoenix. But I think it's true for any organization. And healthcare is a regulated space. And I know nobody here is from healthcare, but it still gives you a sense. So first of all, the specific answer to your question is 91%. 91% are human error in healthcare. But human error, these are victims, right? It's not like they went to a Russian cyber site and said, hey, everyone, here's my password. Somebody tricked them. So they're victims. Steve talked about it a little bit. We have a case where somebody took over a vendor, sent a city an email. Their payment was actually due. The email came from the vendor and said, hey, we have a different routing number. And it came Christmas week. And guess what? They even called to check it. and they'd taken over their voice over IP system. And so the criminals even answered the phone, right? Criminals are good at this. So the answer to your question is 91%, but it doesn't mean people aren't still crime victims. And it actually, Lorna asked a question in the chat, and I'm going to answer it here. What's the average payout to an insured organization that has a breach? 4.8 million. And it's 4.8 million because it's not just fixing that. It's the money that gets lost. It's the cleanup. It's all those things. Mike put in chat there. 75% of cyber attacks are caused by human failures, and 25% miscues. Yeah, I mean the numbers I guess are a little bit different in healthcare, but it's massively human error is the answer to your question there.
And it's easy to see why. I mean, I can package up some exotic exploit and, hopefully I get that through your system so that bait gets hung in front of you. And hopefully I get you to do something stupid. And hopefully your system is vulnerable to the exploit. Or I can just walk into your network by getting you to give me a password. Right. And so it's the control that will reliably fail is well known to be the one between the ears.
And one of the things we do, our company does, is something called social engineering testing and penetration testing. And what that is if you want to find out what the vulnerabilities in your system are, you hire us and we will tell you. And we have a social engineer on staff. She's in California. She's amazing. And she doesn't fail. She tricks people into getting into their things. She will send an email that says, hey, there's an attachment here. And it comes from HR at your company, and it says, here's the new dress code when you return to office. And guess how many people click on that? A lot of people click on that.
A lot.
And so, or the penetration testers, use technology to try to break into your system, but typically they can get in through people.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that we're doing with G2 is offering an assessment to prepare you to answer the questions that Steve is talking about. So you can know whether you're truthfully answering yes. And we're working with G2 on that.
That's a perfect segue, actually, to, I think we're ready to go into the next slide, since I just want to be cognizant of time, which is Jake and we went through some of the most common insurance providers' cyber applications and plucked out the sections that people need to know how to answer. So we came up with 10 cyber controls that are required. And for me personally, I handle all lines of insurance, not just cyber. So sometimes even this is over my head and I don't know how to advise a client on the very detailed intricacies of some of these questions. So I'll bring it back to the panel by asking, who at an organization should be completing a cyber application?
I love that one.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I have lots of stories about that one. One thing that I know that shouldn't be filling out your insurance application is your retail insurance broker. But I know that a lot of our customers like our retail insurance broker to do it for them to help them move the process along. Because if there's one thing that I know that's universal, people do not like filling out insurance applications across the world, right? Myself included. I'm sure you don't either, Lauren. But it should be a holistic approach. IT should be involved with finance, and HR. So usually insurance falls on the lap of finance, being the CFO, because it's a fixed budget item. But with cyber, it really should be including both IT and HR as well. So just like your cybersecurity hygiene and your controls, it takes a village. It needs to be a holistic response from multiple angles. And I think the real honest answer that it should be is that multiple people should touch that. The CFO needs to provide the information on revenues and exposure information. IT needs to be providing answers on controls, and HR needs to be providing answers on training. And is that the reality? Not really. With companies that have it under good control. Yeah, and that should be in concert with your retail broker. A retail broker, and Lauren and G2, will say, hey, you'll have a contact, and then say, hey, we're there for you, and it should be a process that's fluid, that takes into account inputs from multiple resources, and the first run at it should be a first draft as well, that is open to critique and improvements before it goes out to the insurance companies.
You bring up a good point there, Steve, in that once your application is filled out, it should be reviewed before it hits the desk of an underwriter, because Steve and I have worked many times with clients where we'll get the app and Steve will look at it and go, it's not good enough. And we're not sending this out. Otherwise, we're going to get either terrible terms where your premium is so high that you would have wished you didn't turn in the application, or we'd need to go implement some new software for you guys because you'd rather spend that in software making your network secure than in insurance premium. So it's really important that you give yourself enough of a lead time to really review and make sure that the answers are appropriate before you hit the marketplace. Because once it's out, then you can't unring the bell. So you got to make sure that it's really where it needs to be before it gets into the hands of the underwriter.
Yeah, and I think Steve made a good point too, that someone with a fiduciary responsibility really needs to be in that loop, right? It can't be, the IT staff just doing that without any kind of oversight, because, frankly, transferring your risk through insurance is risk management. So, a risk manager, a CFO, general counsel, right? I think they all need to have eyes on before it does go out to the underwriter to make sure that the answers there are appropriate for their swim lane as well, right? Because they've got that I'm thinking about the business, I'm thinking about managing risk kind of lens that they're viewing things through.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't you guys kind of walk through some of these boxes so that people get an understanding of what the things are that underwriters want to see?
Yeah, I'll step through it because you and I created this, and then Steve and Mike, why don't you just interrupt me as I go? So we talked about multi-factor authentication, data backups, and recovery. So the idea is that if you get hit by ransomware or if all your information goes away, the insurance companies want to know that your data backups are safe and that you'll be able to recover quickly. Remember, ransomware operators know that. And so if your data backups are connected to your system, they'll just infect your data backups. Business continuity plan. Steve, this is one you're passionate around and you've seen, but they want to know if you go down that you have a continuity plan. And if you go down, that you'll be able to operate on paper until you can come back up. And that's connected to data backups and recovery. Was there anything else you wanted to hit on business continuity, Steve?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And it used to be just, do you have a business continuity plan or disaster recovery plan? Yes or no. Now it's, okay, you are required to have it. Have you tested it recently? Yes. Have you tested it? Have you wiped your system and re-input all of your data from backups? Okay, yes. And then yes or no. And if you haven't, then, okay, well, how do you know that you can get back up if a ransomware attack does happen? And then the final aspect of that is now that they are making sure that you can both get off of your systems or unplug your systems and then plug them back in and restore data. And that you can also, before you restore those systems, scan for malware. Because if your malware gets into your backups and then you just insert it back in when you power back up, well, then you never really did anything. So yeah, that's becoming more and more of a factor. Essentially, if the hackers can take you offline and you don't have a way to get back up or save your data, then you are ripe for whatever they can ask for you to hold you for ransom, right?
Yeah.
If you eliminate that risk and you can wipe them from your systems, scan for malware, and then re-input all your data from backups, then you almost have some immunity from their effects, right? So that's a huge aspect of what the carriers are now asking, is that not only do you have a plan, have you tested it? Has it been tested recently? And can you test it and make sure it's free from malware.
Yeah, and then data encryption. They want to make sure your data is encrypted, so if the bad guys get in, they can't see it. We've seen some weirdness around that, which we could cover in a whole hour-long thing. Employee education. That's your phishing testing. That's your security awareness training. Vulnerability management. That's if you have a device that has or something that needs patched, that you have a plan to patch it, that you're patching quickly. Used to be you could wait a month, a quarter to patch it. Now you need to patch immediately because the bad guys are exploiting those in 48 hours. Securing remote access. We talked about that earlier with people logging in from home. We've seen a ton of bad guys getting in through VPN connections. 24/7 detection response. What they want to know there is if a bad guy gets in at 1 a.m. on Christmas Eve, that somebody's going to see it very fast and be able to do something about it. And if you don't have a way to do that's a problem. Hospital I just talked to, they said, oh yeah, you know what? The bad guy got in 1 a.m. on a Saturday. Well, guess what? Bad guys always get in at 1 a.m. on a Saturday because they know you're not there. Endpoint protection. This is like Windows Defender, Symantec. Some of you might have Norton antivirus, something like that. But these are good endpoint protections for your network so that they spot something if a bad guy gets in. And then information governance, we talked about before, but those are all of the policies over what governs your data, who has access to this, who has access to that. Mike and Steve, anything you want to add on this?
There is something I want to add. There's something that if the world knew about it, it would be on this list. And that is a policy that is employed by certainly government, but a lot of the private sector, and it's called de minimis use. De minimis use says you can use the company or the government agency's technology for your personal use as long as it doesn't cost extra, affect productivity, or cause a security problem. And I can prove that it does all three. I can also prove, and the numbers that we measured at the city of Seattle have been borne out by other research, 40% of the compromised assets in a network are due to the use of personal email. And so if you prohibit the use of personal email and have a policy that says personal use on a personal device, 40% of the problem, boo, right off a cliff. So that just seems to me to be this incredibly easy thing to do that moves the needle a lot. And I'm surprised it's not on this list. I do understand the difficulty in implementing policy like that because people don't like, their toy taken away from them.
And I'll also add, so essentially, what Lauren laid out earlier is this two-step process where, Lauren, you said 60 to 90 days before your renewal, you want to know how you can answer all of these questions. And so
I'd even say more than 60 to 90 days.
Yeah.
Because if there's a problem, you want to give yourself time to rectify it.
And so that's doing that first risk assessment of, okay, how do we answer these 10 questions? These are more than 10 questions, but these 10 areas, how do we answer those? And then afterwards, if you figure out that you have to answer no, how do you go about that? And, we give a ton of advice on MFA, data backups and recovery. We help people develop business continuity plans, data encryption, employee education. We do free security awareness training every other week. Send people to our free security awareness training. Email me. I'll send you a link.
Is that tomorrow? I think it's tomorrow.
It is tomorrow. We're going to do one tomorrow.
Okay.
Vulnerability management. You can handle that with a scanner that we can provide. We provide advice on remote access, the 24/7 detection response. Those are those security operations centers that watch your network all the time. Endpoint protection. We give a lot of advice on that, can help people figure out what's best for them. And then information governance. Mike didn't mention this, but one of the things he does sometimes is provide a vCISO service. That's virtual CISO. CISO is head of cybersecurity, where he gives a lot of advice on that, helps organizations with their information governance.
To whip their butts into shape is what
that is on his business card. That is in fact what he says.
Okay, here's one other question. What if the company or organization is really small and they say, this is a lot? Do we have to do all of this? We only use cloud-based providers. We have no internal servers. Where do we start? Can I pick and choose? How would you answer that?
So I'll take a stab real quick. So when you put your stuff into the cloud, it's a shared responsibility model. And the cloud provider does a bunch of security things, provides security logging, but it's up to you to put an application in there that isn't broken, because you can perfectly shoot yourself in the foot by using a very secure cloud provider and putting, an application in there that hasn't been tested for security, doesn't do server-side input validation, all the things that you're supposed to do. So the cloud, is not the the silver bullet to all of this. It's how you use it and how careful you are about what you're putting into it.
Yeah, it's a tough one because smaller companies have less resources, but it doesn't mean that you can't still try to control what you can control. And one thing, I didn't get a chance to kind of get in there on the employee education, but I think we all understand that cyber and privacy, security and liability is something that scares all of us, right? And it is a big vulnerability for our businesses. It's a big vulnerability for the leaders in our business. And we all can agree that the employees are the biggest vulnerability. And we want to make the work environment an easy place to work and an enjoyable place to work. But can we honestly say that we're all doing enough training of our employees to be aware of malicious links and suspicious PDFs and suspicious attachments and personal email? There's no way. There's no way. I think that, if as long as you're preaching from the top down, whether you're 5 employees, 50 employees, or 500 employees, the importance of, hey, this is our company, let's try to treat it like it's your own. Don't click on silly links. Don't surf around on, stupid stuff that you shouldn't be surfing around on company devices. Then, it keeps your arms around that. And so I think that if companies show they care from the leadership and the IT and the HR, then the employees can, tend to show that they care. So I think that
Totally.
is something that is in general, as long as you are showing an aura of we care about cybersecurity, we care because both the companies we work with, the employees that work for us, and the companies that both businesses and people are our customers can be affected by this. So as a whole, as long as we show that we care and we do some more training, then I think that will make everybody a little bit more aware that, hey, you can hover over a link and see if it's actually something that is coming from what you think it is. Now, a lot of people don't even know that small little thing like that. So I think the employee training is huge.
And I want to just add to that, just because the insurance companies are asking people to do this and they're pushing people to do this, they happen to be the right things to do. And to Steve's point, for the culture, they're the right things to do. I also want to share our email addresses if people want to get in touch with us. This is a good way to do it. And I said that I would put a survey link in the chat. We've recognized the irony of, after telling people not to click links, and links are scary, of putting a link in the chat. But please take the survey. We'd love your opinions on this very much. So the survey link there is in the chat. And all of our email addresses. We didn't give you Steve's email address because you get to Steve through Lauren.
Steve is secret.
And then mine is the vanity. And then mine is the vanity one because I'm the van one. But that's how that goes.
You're like Madonna.
I'm right. I should have done Madonna at criticalinsight.com, but then I'd have to sing Madonna songs anytime somebody emailed me. We're just about out of time here. We want to thank everybody for joining us. Lauren, thank you so much for putting this together, and Mike and Steve, thanks for joining. And I have to say, in our work with G2, they're excellent partners, and really good folks. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We hope that your 2022 is off to a very secure start. And obviously, if you have any questions, please shoot us an email. Please fill out the survey.
And personal use on a personal device.
Right. Mike's going to leave you with that. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. And have a good day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.